Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this week's Building Power. I am your host, Zakia Sankara Jabbar. We are excited to welcome you back to our weekly show, weekly broadcast, where we are lifting up the voices of parents. We're also centering the experiences, particularly of Black parents and other parents of color. And so today I'm really excited to welcome my dear friend, Dr. Tunette Powell. So Dr. Powell is an activist mama. She's a researcher, storyteller, and educator who believes truth is a form of activism and an agent for change. As an established author and researcher, Dr. Powell has published several books and papers and has spoken to groups around the country on topics including the school-to-prison pipeline, parent and village engagement, and school-induced collective trauma. In addition, she was a 2013 TEDx speaker and has appeared on Oprah's Lifeclass, NPR, CNN, and MSNBC. Well, that is an amazing short resume. I will tell you, Tunette. I feel the need to really tell people as well that you earned your PhD in education at the University of California, Los Angeles, or otherwise known as UCLA. Her dissertation, The Scars of School Suspension, Narratives as Testimonials of Collective Trauma, examines the wounds dealt to Black parents of children who have been suspended in early childhood education. She also serves as the interim director of the UCLA Parent Empowerment Project, a project focused on developing, nurturing, and sustaining culturally relevant and responsive parent and village engagement and parent leadership in our schools. I don't know anybody else, who's more qualified to be talking to me today about what's going on with our parents, what's going on and how we are adjusting, right, to this pandemic. Tunette, welcome to the show. Feel free to share anything else you would like our audience to know about you. And we're going to hop into some questions and just keep it 100 today.
No, I'm grateful to be here. Let's hop into the questions. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So, you and I want to give some background really quickly. And I was sharing before we came live that you and I actually have similar stories. We met doing this work. And I remember reading about you and actually seeing you. I was like, oh my God, that's my story. And I remember you and I connected, I believe it was on LinkedIn, some social media, and we have just been joined at the hip ever since. I think you read my piece. It was in Center for American Progress, and we just connected, and I was like, wow, here we are, two Black moms, two Black women, completely different parts of the country who was activated because our babies, 3-year-old Black boys, were traumatized, were identified, and pathologized in preschool. Can you share a little bit more about your story and how you got activated?
Yeah. I mean, definitely we share very similar stories. And I think for me, I was doing work in education, but I was not thinking about systemic racism or any kind of work at a systemic level. Nothing like that at all. I was just thinking, okay, how do I help students who were having negative school experiences? How am I in the classroom working with kids who have been pushed out of school? So I was already thinking about kids who are being pushed out, but I was thinking at it very much, mentorship. How do I work with these students, support these students? And in the middle of all that work, both of my sons, my oldest two sons, I should say I have 3 sons, but my oldest 2 sons, JJ and Joa, they were 3 and 4 years old, and they were suspended in the same month of 2014. And it rocked my world when I tell you, because one of the things, I'm not sure if you knew, but I was suspended and expelled in school all growing up. So the first immediate thing that happens, when my kids are suspended is I think, oh, this is hereditary, right? This is something that's how I think, I am a bad parent. I was a bad child.
I went through that too.
You go, it's the internalization that they want us to live with and sit with. But there was something unique about the same year that my kids were suspended. It was the same year that the Office of Civil Rights released the data showing that Black preschoolers are suspended more than any other group of kids.
Yep.
And it came out the same time that my kids were suspended. And it's like this light switch just flipped on. It was like, what? I already had felt something. My kids were not living the same life that I was. I grew up in the war on drugs era. It's a very different time, very different dynamic. And that really woke me up, and I've never looked back. I dedicated my life to this work after this happened to my kids. I knew that, on a personal level, I could make sure that my kids were good because I was going to advocate and fight. But I started thinking about, what about all of our other Black babies? What about all the other parents around the country who have been made to feel like it's them, like it's genetic and hereditary? Oh no. And so ever since then, I've been, really trying to work with parents. Of course, you and I have been connected, and that's been great. I'm here for all of us.
No, that's good. That's exactly right. I appreciate the fact that you included me as well in a project that you were writing about, where you interview parents, other parents who had similar experiences, and that was very eye-opening when I got a chance to, like, obviously, I know my story, I know your story, but when I read the other stories of the parents, I'm like, this is really an endemic issue. One of the things from my story that you may remember, I was actually politicized by reading a book by Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. The first edition was actually written, I believe, in 1983 when I was only 2 years old. So it was written in 1983. The book's title was "Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys," and I read that book. And everything in it applied to what had happened to my son in 2011, right? And I was just like, okay, that was sort of my light bulb. Like how when you said you got the report from the Office of Civil Rights, my light bulb was like, oh, okay, I'm not a bad parent. This is an issue. Like this happens to a lot of kids. And that was my impetus to start interviewing other Black parents. Can you talk about what are some of the biggest obstacles you see from a parent's perspective and from a professional perspective when it comes to education equity for Black children?
Whew. Wow.
Where to
Yeah.
start?
There are so many layers, but, I think some of the big ones, I think number one, I'm just going to be real. We're just going to put it on the table.
Put it on the table.
That, especially in Los Angeles, I'm just being real. Teachers unions have been very, very big obstacles. And I say that, and I'm being real with you. And I think when we think about what unions are supposed to be, making sure people get fair wages, if they get hurt on the job, you know what I mean? If they're like all of those type of things, I'm all for it when a union. When we think about what teachers unions have done in this country, they have stood in the way of whether Black Lives Matter or not in a lot of areas. So that's one, right? There are also so many things like in
Can
LA.
you talk a little bit about some of the intricacies though on how teachers union, because this is good, right? This is good. I know, this conversation may ruffle some feathers.
It will.
But the reason why I want you to go a little bit deeper into that though is because it mirrors my experience when we were working in Dayton, Ohio. You talking about Los Angeles. We were working in Dayton, Ohio to amend and repeal Ohio's zero tolerance law, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the teachers union was our biggest obstacle.
Well, you're absolutely right. And when, after I was activated in 2014, I was helping work on policy all around the country. And the number one question that I got from policymakers was always, how do I get the teachers union on board? That was always the number one question. And it was always interesting to me because, of course, when we talk about, a lot of the policies that get, that result in the disparities that we see, a lot of times people will say, well, that's a principal making a decision. Oh, that's a district's policy. But everything is about implementation of those policies, right? And so the policy is important, but there is a saying that goes, 10% of what happens is policy and 90% is implementation. And so we think about how it's implemented on the ground, and suspension begins in a classroom, right? And so even if there are people making decisions outside of that classroom, it begins a lot of times, most often, between a child and a teacher. And especially when we're talking about early childhood education, we're not talking about kids who got into a fight, in the courtyard or things like that. We're talking about something happened in a classroom and a teacher made a decision. And so when we think about that, that's just one example when we think about school discipline. But when we think about, it goes on and on. Like if we think about right now with remote learning, the unions have been the most powerful people in the room deciding what instruction looks like.
Exactly.
Right. And so then, school is happening in our house and we had no say. And to me, teachers unions have been some of the most vocal folks who have been saying Black Lives Matter. Well, you ought to wanted Black parents in that room negotiating, right? Because school is happening in our house. It's our babies, right? All around. You should have wanted parents in that room and said, you know what? We believe that Black lives matter. We believe that brown lives matter. We believe in this. So we know that they need to be at the table. It needs to be parents and students at the table. We just have not had that. And there is a history, of this relationship or a breakdown in the relationship historically between like unions and parents, and if you go back and you look at some of that history, you will see that there has been a big clash, even when you think about choice, right? And that's a very political topic. And we know that Republicans, some Republicans have hijacked it and, it's become a Republican versus Democrat. And there are Democrats who believe in choice as well. But when we think about choice, there have been a lot of Black mamas who have been on the front line of that work. And, they've been left out of those narratives. Right? And we've said, it's all about billionaires. No, there are Black folks who fought for that because we are tired of the public education that we've been getting year after year and being made to feel guilty when we want something different. Right? So in terms of thinking about the relationship between parents and unions, especially Black parents, there is, there has been a very unhealthy relationship and a very, it's been a lot of disenfranchisement, a lot of pushing out. And if we want to think about where we go from here, we have to be able to grapple with and address the issues and the anti-Blackness that has been persistent in a lot of unions across the country.
Yeah, that's really good. It's certainly indicative of my own experience. I think that let's talk about this idea that you brought up. Last week was the Democratic National Committee. This week is the Republican National Committee. And I cringe because I'm seeing the tweets. I have to be honest, I have not watched either one.
I watched them both, the different parts.
No, that's great. No, I think that's great. I just decided I'm not gonna get my energy because a lot of it is fear mongering. Anyway, it's politics, right? They're trying to get votes. Very performative. It's almost a circus. Anyway, I want to get to the issue you brought up around this idea of choice. You're right. That whole idea has completely erased that there were Black moms like Miss Virginia here in the DC area who actually
and Shirley Ford in LA. Right.
And Shirley Ford in LA, all over the country. We've completely erased the fact that this was, and also the other thing that people are forgetting is that there were and are still some African-centered charter schools who wanted to be able to have control over the curriculum and actually control over who they hire as teachers. We don't talk about the nuances and
intricacies.
Instead, people want to focus on the KIPS of the world and some of the other big chain, charter schools, which certainly I'm going to admit, some of them are very much problematic. Some of them are absolutely just like the public schools. So I want to get that off the table. But to attack the whole idea of parents actually having some choice in how their children are educated, I could never get on board with as a parent, especially with my experience with 2 Black babies. So I want you to kind of lean in a little bit and talk a little bit more about this tension between the choice movement and, unfortunately, like you just noted, the Republican National Committee or the Republicans have really hijacked this idea of choice, and they actually support it. So certainly they don't support it for the same reasons we do, but where do Black people, how do we make a decision?
This is it's an interesting conversation, right? It's very complicated, I would say, and it's an interesting space. So I used to live in Nebraska, right? I was living in Nebraska for 6 years, and there's no charter school law. And so on one end, you had Black parents who were absolutely pushing for charter school laws. And you had racist Pete Ricketts, who is the governor, also fighting, for charter schools. And you would be like, okay, what? But then you also had some racism, on the part of other billionaires like the Buffett family, who only wanted public schools. And you would say, well, why are these billionaires, on one end fighting for public and one end fighting for charter? It's all about power. So the Buffetts run the public schools in Omaha. So there is no reason for them to want to need charters because they already run the public school, right? And then when you put that in the context of Ricketts, he didn't want to expand Medicaid, but he wanted charters. It didn't make sense to me. But we have to be able to have a conversation that in this fold, there were all these Black parents who wanted charters, not because they wanted to hang out with Pete Ricketts or they felt any way similar to Pete Ricketts. They wanted Medicaid expanded and they wanted charters because they wanted to have control over their children's education. And so that's what we're seeing all around the country, where we're lumping everybody together. I absolutely call out all of the problematic charters, just like I call out all the problematic public schools, right? And so, but within that, there are some amazing charters, there are some amazing public schools, and we have to be able to talk about the nuance there, right? We have to be able to talk about the variation. And when we begin to lump them together, like, how are we better for that? My kids go to a public school now, but the only reason why that public school is what it is because it was birthed out of a charter school model that was for us, by us, right? It is mostly all Black teachers with a super Black curriculum, but they don't get there without that charter school, right? And that charter school ended up going out of business, so they were able to use that model. But let's be honest, that there is a need for multiple kinds of schools. And to me, where the tension lies is in control and power. Right, I feel that for Black and brown families, there are groups and organizations, institutions, politicians who feel that they should be able to control us. They should tell us where to go, that we should stay in felon schools, that we should have the most novice teachers and the must hire principals, and let us never ever feel that we have enough power to say anything about it. Right? We should accept, mediocrity in its finest, and that's just not what we are. And so while I critique all education in this country because we know the history of that, but when it's working, I will also say that and support that. And we need to be able to have different forms of school. There's a lane for private. There's a lane for charter. There's a lane for public. And I absolutely believe that without choice, we will be stuck in some schools that were never intended to serve us and had no intention of improving to serve us better. And so, I mean, that's, so I feel that, and this is my big thing, right? We typically want to be on a side. And I tell people all the time, I would be a terrible gangster.
We got to stop allowing people to force us into binaries. We got to go back to critical
thinking. We have
to
stop. Like, it's not blood or crip. It's not Republicans or Democrats. It's not charter or public school. Like, I'm going to be somewhere always floating around. Like, that's why I said it's about truth. It's about what's working. It's about what we need. And when we operate from binaries, it is so problematic. I'm sick of it. And people, sometimes they don't know what to do with, parents like you and I. They want to know what we are, right? It's like, let me see where to put her. You can't put me in a box, right? Like, you cannot put me in a box. You can try, but then you might see, oh, she's hanging over there. I thought she was, I'm not a gangbanger. I am here for truth no matter who tells it, right? That's how Malcolm X stood. I stand on his shoulders in that same vein. And so sometimes I might agree, even with a teachers union, right? Like, sometimes we're on the same side of it. We're advocating like, yeah, this needs to happen. And sometimes I'm standing with, charter groups because it makes sense. You got to think about what makes sense. And we need to do that in our schools. We need to do that across our nation in terms of politics, that I'm not Democrats or bust. You know what I mean? I'm really about who is for us, who is ready, to pay the education debt, who is ready to dismantle the systems that continue to plague our nation. And it might be a Democrat today and a Republican tomorrow, it might be a mix of folks. But I'm gonna tell you what, I'm not here to be, I'm not gonna stand in allegiance with institutions. I'm with the people. And to be with the people, you have to ruffle some feathers. Yeah, we have to ruffle some feathers. And that's why I said, I'm off work this morning because I want to have a very honest conversation about where we have to go. And, we cannot ask for a revolution if we don't want to be revolutionary. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yes. We can't ask for a revolution if we don't want to be revolutionary. That's gold. This has been really so good. And I'm, want to take a moment to just encourage people who are watching to go ahead and make sure you put your comments and questions. We want to get to questions from our audience as well. We're talking about education, building power and grassroots education advocacy and disrupting binaries. Dr. Tunette Powell is with us today, an activist, mama, and researcher. So our sister knows exactly what she's talking about. So I feel like, I love to talk about the issues, what the problems are, but we do have a lot of parents who are really struggling right now, including myself, right? Like working parents. You're a working mom, you and your husband, like me and my husband, we're working, right? And we're trying to figure out how to adjust to this new schooling, and how it's happening, right? Like, virtual only, some parents are doing pods. So what are some tools and strategies, right, that should Black parents have in their arsenal to be great advocates for their children in the education system that right now most of the teachers union actually hold the most power for?
Yeah. So there's a multi-level strategy. Number one is
Absolutely.
how you just survive your day-to-day, right? And that's not what we want to stay. But when we think about survival, if you can form pods together, that's going to be extremely important, right? We're going to have to connect with each other. Right now, I have my neighbor who has come today to help support my babies, and I'm especially thankful for it. And we need more of that. We need that village-minded, okay, bring your kids, I got my kids. And we know we have to be safe, of course, and all those things. But there's a way to do that and still have the pods and still support each other. We have to take care of ourselves, right? Our Black men and our Black women, our Black mothers and our Black fathers. We have to absolutely tap into taking care of ourselves. The other side of that is how we do more than survive, right? In the words of Bettina Love. And I think the more than survival is what is our strategy to really think about power and where our power lies in these schools. And I think one of the things is that we, parents and children, are the most powerful group in the United States. I'm gonna say it again because I don't know if we always think about that. We are the most powerful group in education, the most powerful group. So I'm at a moment where I'm like, if we're not in those negotiating rooms on what school looks like for our kids, if we are not at the table, and not just at the table, but co-constructing the table, then we need to sit out. We have got to be radical. And right now I'm thinking about how do we organize strikes all around the country where we come with our list of demands and say, this is what we need.
You mean parents organizing strikes? Yeah, dig into that.
Yes, think about that. Think about when we looked at, last year, for an example, teachers all over the country were striking, right? And they knew that's how they're powerful. And this is something we can learn from teachers unions that's very important. And I applaud them for that, right? Strike, do what you need to do to move what you want to move. So they said we need better wages, right? We need, all these things. We need more nurses in our schools, right? All of these things they need. And they said, if you don't give them to us, we're not coming to work. We're going to strike. There is a moment where, especially for parents of color, and especially my Black parents, where we have been asking for better in our schools for a very long time. Public schools were our freedom dreams. Right? Let's get that correct. That was our freedom dreams. It is what we wanted.
Please share that history. A lot of people don't know that. The reason why we have public schools in this country was because of Black folks.
If we had left it to white folks, schools would have been for white wealthy men. That's it. White wealthy men. We fought for public schools. And we have gotten none of what we have deserved. And we are in a moment right now where all we have to do, attendance is if you log in. We need to be saying we will not log in. Our children will not log in until we are at the table. Our children will not log in until these lists of demands are met. And we have to think about what it is that we want. What do we deserve as a people? What are the investments we want to see? And guess what? Every child you have is a dollar amount in a school district. So when they don't log in, that school district loses money. We have to be that radical if we want to see change. That is how certain groups get their power. That is why the teachers union has been powerful. And that is a credit to them, right? That is a great thing of what they've been able to do. We can do that very same thing. We have to say we're not showing up. We are not showing up. And I know that's hard. We are working. And trust me, I am working. My husband is working. But we are getting very little right now from our schools. So in a lot of cases, it's almost like they're not even at school. So if we ever had a moment where we could strike, where we could say we're not going in, our kids are not logging on, this would be that moment. We already talked about we're not going back to the normal, right? This is going to be something new. It's going to be something different. But what we've seen is that we have this same system just on a different platform. So this is our moment to actually say, no, we're really not going back to normal. Not only are we shifting platforms, we are going to shift power. And that's what we have to be willing to do as parents. And I think this is the right opportunity right now. And we need parents everywhere. We need the organizations that say they serve and stand alongside of parents to really step up in this moment and say, this is our moment to shift power. It's our moment to get what we deserve. And that if you don't want to pay off the education debt, we're going to force it, right? You're going to have no choice but to give us what's owed to us.
Well, that sounds like a powerful idea, and I'm certainly with it. It's interesting because on the first virtual town hall that we had back in June, this idea actually came up. And so I think some of the tension around that was that some folks felt, and we can talk about this, some folks felt that one of the strategies or tools that would be used to force parents to comply or get in line was truancy laws.
Mhm.
Um, let's talk about how truancy laws can be weaponized against parents who may want to organize a similar strike.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. I've been on the wrong end of truancy laws as a young person myself. And so, my mother was forced to pay a fine and I was forced to meet with a probation officer. And, it is just it puts us in the system, right? It's another form of a school to prison pipeline.
Pipeline.
Right. And we tend to talk about, suspensions and expulsions, but these truancy laws are right there. And I
Yes.
think, it
It
does,
criminalizes
it puts
parents.
a lot of people in fear. And this is what, and again, this is what the system has used to divide us, right? And so this is what's kept parents on the porch. As if I use my father's words, he says most people on the porch. But these are the reasons why people stay on the porch and don't come out in the street, because we say, oh, well, these truancy laws. And I think, this is where groups like ACLU and other legal groups have to step up. They have to say, like, we will represent you pro bono, and how do we push in this moment? We have to think about that, and what does that look like? How are we going to support families where they don't have to worry about some of those fears?
Yes.
But I also want to think about that there's always risk involved in everything that we're doing.
That's right.
And if we look at civil rights movements and we look historically across, people were going to jail for what they believed in.
That's right.
And we're at a moment where we have to think about how important is this to us, and are we willing to risk that for the education that our babies deserve? And how radical do we want to be? Again, we can't ask for a revolution if we're not willing to be revolutionary. And so I think on one end, we have to make sure that all of our lawyers and legal folks, if we have white allies that really want to be co-conspirators, this is your moment to step up and say, I can represent you pro bono, that we can push in some of these areas. This is an opportunity for Black teachers to also get on the right side of this.
That's
and
right.
Black administrators and Black superintendents, because all of these things have to be reported, you know what I mean? And to disrupt the system from the inside with us and say, you know what, no more. This is a moment where people of color can step up in all of the areas. And it doesn't have to be, the same politics that we always play. Let's stand together in solidarity. And even white co-conspirators, right? They can say, we reject, this idea that if they're striking, that, we'll report them and it'll be truancy laws and truancy issues. They can stand in the gap and say, no, we support what they're doing. We have a moment right now where the people who are shouting Black Lives Matter because it's so loud right now, right? The noise is loud, but the action is
so
very
contradictory too.
Right, the action is it's slow.
You got
Black
Lives Matter signs in gentrified neighborhoods all over DC. I'm about sick of it at this point.
Come on, it's the same old thing, right? And so this is your moment where you can mean it, right? Let's mean it. Let's see where we are in America, right? Let's get a temperature of where we are. I mean, I think I know where we are, but I always like to give people the opportunity to be radical and revolutionary, to back up what they said. And this is the moment we got to think about, what does it look like to organize that all over the country, right? We can do this, and we need to protect our parents. We need to, continue to stand alongside of our parents, support our parents. And I know every parent might not do it. I'm still here to support you. Like, I'm still here to stand with you. I'm parents over everything. So I'm never going to step away over everything. I mean, I'm always going to stand with parents, even if, they can't be on the front lines with us, for a multitude of reasons. I know how it works, but I want you to know that, folks like Zakia and I, like, we're here, on the front lines because we absolutely know that it won't happen. It won't happen if we don't push for it. We will keep the status quo. And so I'm really at a point where if I got to go to jail for it, I'm ready. And I am, and I say that I'm ready to die for this, and I think, my job, I treat every day, I'm being very honest and raw. I treat every day where with my kids, I'm nurturing them. So, and building them up in a way where if I was not here, they could go on and move on, but I'm ready to die for this. If you have been a parent in this system,
right,
you cannot continue to sit around and watch what is happening to our babies every single day.
That's right.
And that's, we think about all of the police brutality that's happening in this world. And it's
happening in our schools.
It's happening, but it's in our schools. In a moment that we only focus on what's happening outside of our schools, we are losing the battle. Our kids spend a lot of time in schools. They deserve to go to places where they are being lifted up and built up. Our schools should not be the same things that we got to deal with outside of our schools.
That's
and
right.
So all of my life's work is all about how do we, build what it is that our ancestors dreamed of. This is not the public school that they dreamed of.
It is
and
not.
We need to get closer to that.
Right. That you are speaking real truth, girl. You getting some love in the comments. I actually have a question for you for my Facebook watch party. And then there is also a question in the other comment section. One parent, sister of mine out of Dayton, Ohio, said, what do you think we can do at home to ensure this hybrid system of schooling is successful? She said, I had to change my work schedule to work with her during school hours.
Yeah, I had to do the same thing. It's been a struggle, I think, like I said, if we can form pods, I've been really, working with a lot of Black parents, a lot in Texas, because that's my hometown in San Antonio, Texas. And how do we come together, around these different pods?
Right.
Again, if this is where I feel like, if white folks are on the call and feel good, like this is where a form of reparations, to be given money toward us being able to, have the support. I also think we're at an interesting moment where I'm wondering if Dayton, Ohio, are there some really good Black schools as well? And we can, enroll our kids there since it is remote learning. I do think that some of the weight has been elevated to a certain point because my youngest two kids are at an all Black school and the relationship is just a lot different. They're just not a Black school in terms of like what people look like. But in every, part of that, right? So, it's a Black curriculum and they understand like the context of what it means to be learning from home. And are there those opportunities where you can do that as well? I think is important, but the pods are going to be, a big one. I also think, I've been working with some families right now on what is it about the school day right now that's not working? You know what I mean? Where you've had to change your schedule. And if there's any flexibility within your district or within your, even in the classroom where you can kind of push back a little bit on what the day looks like. If there's an opportunity to do that, I definitely think we should do that because I do think that schools ought to be looking at, what's working for parents. One of the homeschooling, I have a lot of friends that's been homeschooling recently. There's a lot of support in homeschooling with, groups like Epic and Ali, where they give you resources for your child. But when I talk to families who are homeschooling, and the difference I see between homeschooling your kids and using those the online platforms and doing it through the school way is that the flexibility is there, right? And I think so in terms, for some families, homeschooling is going to be the route because it will give you the flexibility that some of the more formal schooling that we have won't give you. They're saying these are the hours, this is how it is. And so I do think that, looking into homeschooling could be an option. You should think about what it is, that we want. But I also think too, we're gonna have to start forming our own schools. I think that we're making room for what that looks like. Whether that be, virtual, FUBU spaces, or whether that is, physical schools. When we get to that point, how do we do that and how do we support what that looks like? And I know for you, Zakia, you've done a lot of work in that area. How do we have more of our own schools? It's something that I'm always thinking about. There are a lot of Black mothers in LA who've been starting their own schools. There are a couple new ones that started this school year. And so I think, how do we start our own schools? How do we get with our neighborhood? You know what I mean? I'm always going to be big on the village. I didn't know my neighbors that well. They are recently moved in, but I live in an all Black neighborhood. And so, you knock on that door next door, you let them meet your kids, they meet you, and you get to the point where it's like, I need help. How do we do that? How do we think about what that is? And, if I could take your kids for a couple of days, you take mine, just thinking about some of those things. We have to get back to the village.
School. Going back to that village.
Back to the basics. We have done this forever. You know what I mean? We have, and we've gotten a little bit out of the way of it because, capitalism is thick and, we have to work more. And, I see you've been in the home buying market and looking, so you see what the mortgages are looking like out here.
Oh, man.
So we know the reality of where we are in America, that you have to work, but I do think, if there are elders in the community, elders have always stepped up, who have been in a different situation where they haven't been working full time. There are a lot of young people who are, maybe in college and doing online schooling right now, and
Right.
might have the flexibility. Let's call a neighborhood meeting. Let's figure it out.
Right. I love that. So I wanted to go to some more questions. So this question, I think with your last comment, you kind of answered, but I wanted to read it to you anyway. One of the commenters said 100% spot on in terms of what you've been saying. As parents rise to this moment, what alternative options of schools do we have to help our children succeed academically? You just talked to some of those options in terms of looking at homeschooling collectives, going back to the village, making sure that we're conversating with folks who are right in our neighborhood and building relationships. Again, that old school way of how we used to be. Like you said before, capitalism just made us be on this damn rat wheel where we're constantly working, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, and trying to figure out how to educate our children in the same space. Here's one question. This is from a parent, I believe she's also in California. She said, is there an organized African-American parent, grandparent, or guardian network? We are in California as well.
Well, there are a few. I think, and I don't know if they're in Los Angeles. I mean, for California, I probably know a lot more about Los Angeles than some of the other areas. So we know that there's Cadre in Los Angeles. And Cadre, so even if you're not in Los Angeles, I'm sure Cadre is connected throughout the California area with other parent groups. It's not explicit for Black parents, but it's for majority Black and brown parents. And I think that they've been doing some really good work in Los Angeles. And like I said, I think that they're connected throughout California. So that could be a good starting point. I think that a lot of the things that we're saying today is rooted in the work that they've been doing since the late 90s. So, you have, an unapologetic group of Black and brown parents who are committed to racial justice in schools. So that's one. Recently I've been working with Speak Up, and Speak Up is an organization that is not.
What's that group? Really quickly, Tunette, what's that group that's trying to divest funds from LAUSD to build schools, Black schools in LA? I found out about it actually through you.
What is that group?
It's a Dr. Michael or something.
Michael Beatty. Michael Beatty.
Talk about that, please.
So Michael Beatty, I don't know if his group has a name, but Michael Beatty, so he was on my list. They have so what they have, and again, if you're in LA, this makes sense for you because Michael Beatty, he is a Black brother who, is a math whiz. He's done a lot of math curriculum in schools. He worked with a charter here, and the work that they did around math was just really, really impressive. And he's under the impression that LAUSD, for example, is just way too big. We're talking about 600,000, students, and it's very big. So because of that, there are certain groups that get lost in the mix. So he's been really pushing for what it would look like for us to have our own district. If they broke the district down, and if you think about Board District 1 in the Los Angeles Unified School District, that's where the largest number of Black families are. So what would it look like to have its own district over there? I mean, and it's 50,000 Black students in LAUSD, and if we were to form our own district, we'd be the 11th largest school district in the state of California. So that means something. So he's been looking at what does that really look like in real life. So he has actually a place, a physical building, and they're doing math pods there, and it's called the Knowledge Shop. So if you look up the Knowledge Shop, you ought to be able to be connected to him. And he's primarily in Los Angeles, but they're doing little pods of 5 students, all grade levels, and they're teaching them math. And, this is all Black folks, like it's a very FUBU. So I definitely recommend them. I was going to say, I think a last one is Speak Up. They're not a Black group, but within Speak Up, they have an African-American parent advisory group who has been doing some really good work at the local and state level. And it's run by a Black mother of 6 named Charnel Blevins. And I like the work that they're doing. They push politics a lot, right? Because you got a mix of charter and public. And I think you need to muddy the waters like that. Because a lot of times you have groups that are just, for public or for charter, and they fall along the political lines. But I think, what Charnel is doing is kind of muddying the waters, and Michael Beatty muddying the waters, right? Like, I think groups are just mostly concerned with how are we doing right by Black kids, and how can Black parents be a part of that? But I think if you start with Cadre, and if you're not in Los Angeles, start with Cadre, because they are connected at a state and national level. If you are in Los Angeles, hit up the Knowledge Shop and Michael Beatty. I definitely think that, they're thinking about how we educate Black babies and how we do that well. And how we create our own districts.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is also a larger systemic issue, something that you and I kind of chatted about offline, is that Black-led groups only are systemically not funded or underfunded. Yeah. So I feel like the fact that we can't name a single Black-led group right now in LA that's doing this kind of work for this our person who asked the question, I think is also a systemic issue around anti-Blackness specifically. I will say also in California, in the Oakland area, there is the Black Organizing Project that was started as a response to a young man who was actually killed by SRO in Oakland Unified School District. In fact, they had a recent victory where they actually are dismantling the Oakland police inside of the schools. So Black Organizing Project is another group that's in California, but it's in Oakland in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So let me see here. I'm just checking to see if we have any other questions or comments. One of the things I also wanted to see if you wanted to share is what are you hearing from parents, right? Like in your community, how are they handling the, of course, the teachers union push for all virtual. How are they handling that? How are you handling that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been tough. So, I feel that I've had to put myself in therapy, I've had to definitely, it's been an emotional roller coaster for me. And it's one day to the next, I'm just living day to day. And I think, when I work with parents, so I've been working with a lot of different parents, mostly all parents of color, but I've been doing a little series with parents who are experiencing homelessness or who are formerly homeless. And, they're seeing the same things as many of the other parents, but it's interesting, where they talked about, number one, just their voices being left out. Right. I think that's really the biggest thing. I think the way that the day is scheduled, I think is really big and been a little bit problematic. And it's been, there are some folks who say it's not enough and some who say it's just too much of a day, depending on what district you're in. Yeah. But I think, part of it is too, is that, school is designed for parents to be absolutely, to be teachers, right. and we've had all these videos come out, from the school districts where they've been saying, find a quiet place, don't be in your bed. Or what if the only seat you have is your bed? Right. So I feel that a lot of the messages are not thinking about the reality of the families that the schools serve in the first place. It comes with the assumption that everybody lives where they have these office spaces and, you have, offices and chairs and desks and all these things set up. Your house wasn't that type of a classroom. Now, it's always been some form of a classroom where it's been very hands-on. We've always been our children's first teachers, but it hasn't been that sit at a desk and sit at a tablet and learn in this way. And so some of the things are around that, what they're asking, some of the demands of making kids be on screen and absolutely, and they don't feel comfortable on screen or, they're not, they live somewhere where they don't want to be on screen.
That is so weird.
Right, multiple our siblings in the same room.
Requiring them to have on their screen. What? Having them require on they're making it a requirement to have on their camera. What you need to see the background of people's houses for?
Right. And, I was talking to somebody recently who last semester, the kid was never on a screen and that kid was doing school out of her vehicle, right? Out of the car. And again, districts are missing the mark because they're so worried about, well, are people cheating or, what are they doing behind the screen? Like, this is our house. This is our space. If my baby shows up, whether they have on, whether they have a camera up or not, like, it's your job to teach. And I've been in a teaching role in a virtual space and I don't obsess over, what a kid shows up looking like or whether their screen is on or not. Like you have to teach. And so again, more ways to try to police students and families. And so I'm hearing a lot of that. But again, I think it comes at the root of it all with all of the challenges is that parents are not at the tables as decision makers, and I also hear that we're not creative. Right? That we just, this was a moment to be creative. And all we did was just put everything online, like outside is canceled. as if being in small groups and social distancing is not a thing, there. And so we have, so many things that are open. My kids, we take them to the beach, you can eat at restaurants outside. Why haven't we got creative about how to do school outside of classroom walls, in groups of 25 or 30? Why haven't we got creative outside of that? Why, and that's some of what we're hearing from parents is just a lack of creativity on the part of schools, but we haven't been creative for a very long time. And I do feel that if you put students and parents at the decision-making table, they will be creative.
Thank you for that. We do have a couple more questions. I want to get to these questions, but I also want to cue up the fact that we're talking about, like you said, nobody's being creative. The other thing is people, like you mentioned, or teachers unions really fought for virtual learning only. We are dealing with the fact that on today, our organization, Citizen Ed and Brightbeam, we are having a day of action right now because there's upwards of 15 million children right now in this country who don't even have access to broadband at all.
Yeah.
And like, we're not, like you said, like we're literally not talking about that. Right. We have a toolkit. We'll drop the link in the comments for everybody on this Facebook video to make sure that you all have access to the toolkit in terms of hopping on social media. There's some sample tweets there. We really have to flood the SEC, these companies like Comcast who are not providing right now. In this country, people need to know internet is not considered a public utility. It's not regulated. We're living in a digitized age, and like you said, Dr. Powell, people are only talking about virtual learning. We are also not being mindful that that this is probably a possibility, and unfortunately, teachers unions have been complicit, that we're about to have digitized education. They're really getting rid of their own jobs. I mean, en masse. I mean, because when you digitize education, you're not going to need as many teachers.
Yeah.
And so we're not even having this conversation around AI. This has been my frustration, is because I'm a seer. I'm able to see, okay, oh, wow, this is a strategy. Because I was shocked at how quick people was like, oh, we can just do virtual. What? I was like, oh my God. And I knew, because I have colleagues in parts of the country. Like I said, I'm in DC. There's tons of kids in DC who don't even have access to broadband. There was tons of kids in Chicago who never logged on.
Same in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Who never logged on. Why are people just going to virtual education and, like you said, and not being creative? Like, we need a massive investment to be able to have, like you said, outside school or smaller social distance schools outside. Like,
and we didn't even do this well. There was no time to plan. So, it's interesting that districts are celebrating that they had so much time to plan. And I asked a district leader, I said, well, can you quantify how much time you had to plan? They had 2.5 mandatory days of training. How is that a lot of time to plan? Right? So literally we threw on this all digital system. And if we look at our teaching pool, they were absolutely not ready for on all virtual, system. Many of them had never used, a Zoom or any of even some of these more basic things. And so the struggle is real. And not only will they lose teachers because we're online like this, they're also going to lose them because they're going to be quitting and leaving because it is all online. You know what I mean?
I have a colleague right now who is a teacher here in Maryland, and she's already like, I got to find another job. This is not what I was trained for. This is not what I signed up for. I'm seeing teachers all over, even professors, like, teaching on Zoom is unsustainable. This is
unsustainable. Unsustainable. Yeah, this is not what this was intended to do. This was have some meetings. It was, every now and then. It was not intended to be a classroom. And so we're just, I am at a moment where the lack of creativity is heartbreaking. But again, it's a reflection of who's at the table.
It is a reflection who at the table. I love you. Keep talking about that. When you don't have the people who are directly impacted, which are students and parents and teachers, of course.
Yeah.
But if teachers are the only voice with administration and you don't have literally the other 2/3 of the pie, we're not going to get the creative solutions that we're looking for, especially from our young people. I'm sure they have some exciting ideas about how they would really like education to evolve in this moment.
Yes.
I also want to take the opportunity to plug the fact that next Monday, we're going to have an entire conversation an entire conversation about how schools need to evolve. We're going to talk about education reparations. We're going to talk about models that have already been implemented, like the Betty Shabazz School in Chicago. They were started by the magnificent Dr. Carol Lee, elder in the Black Power movement and also the Black education movement. She's one of our guests. I mean, it's just going to be amazing. So we're going to actually have an extended conversation about this on Monday, same platform, virtual town hall, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So Tunette, certainly invite you to come and join us on that. I want to see you definitely in the comments, keeping it.
I will be listening. I will.
But let me go to the comments that we have here from the Facebook Live. So this is from Kadra Muhammad. She says some states like California give options for parents to use public funding to fund homeschooling. I tried looking if we could have that in Minnesota and couldn't find it. Can we advocate for that in every state? Hell yeah.
That's you know what? And I've been working with a lot of families outside of California about homeschooling, and I think Texas, I've been trying to work on in there. We absolutely can. We got to think about what that looks like and what how do we walk through that? And I think there are some groups in California that we can probably look to. Definitely, feel free to follow up with me, because you're right. It needs to be like that in every state. Well, I have friends in California who homeschool, and again, they're able to get the resources that they need for their child, exactly what we're missing. So if they needed a desk, all of the school supplies, all of the, money for field trips to be able to actually do things outside of your home, all of that comes with a lot of the homeschooling programs here in LA. So I'd be happy to support and work alongside parents in Minnesota or wherever else who are doing that. I'm easy to find. So please, let's reach out to me. I'm on all social media. I always respond. So let's figure out what that needs to look like, because I do think that that's a very important point, is that the dollars need to follow the child. And, if you're homeschooling your baby, you need to have the resources to do that. The dollars need to follow the child, period. And if you want those dollars, do better by us. Do better by us.
Let me plug this, because this is going to be problematic for the social and racial justice community. And I think this is where the nuances of politics is important, especially when it comes to education. I will say, unfortunately, it was Senator Rand Paul who recently introduced a bill in the Senate that calls for federal funding of education dollars to follow the child. Now, certainly he has libertarian values and politics, and of course he votes with the Republicans, so that may cause some tension, especially for Black folks. And
I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I mean, I literally live by, that. And again, doesn't mean that he's not up for critique or we can't, but there are some policies. That's why I said we can't be around a party. We got to be around what these policies are. What are people actually going to do for us? I mean, I feel like it's important, because if we put Democrats and Republicans together and maybe a couple other groups like independents and others, we can get done what we need to get done, right? I think, there's some, but when we pick sides, that's when we fall apart and fail.
Right.
So, right, we can say that Rand Paul is not our favorite person, but in this particular moment, he did something that we need to expand upon, and we need to think about how we continue that. And I say that, we ought to be able to have that conversation because it's some Democrats that have done some things that are not good, that they're begging for our vote and saying that we ain't Black if we don't vote for them. Right. So again, nobody's going to be perfect, especially if you're a politician, right? That there are going to be policies that sometimes make sense and don't for certain groups. And we have to be able to see ourselves around the different policies and issues, and not just this person or bust, right? And so again, we need to be looking at it. We need to be thinking about that. There have been some of the, and we need to also think about, the choice that was under, Barack Obama. Choice became important, and we try to separate that narrative from his legacy, but there were some things that made choice possible.
Biden will not, if you look at his plan, he is going completely with the teachers.
Well, there's a lot of politics with that as well.
Right.
And if you look at, who he's been backed by, and, follow the money, follow the endorsements, that will tell you everything you need to know. And again, Biden, if you have no right to control what choices families have about their education. And I say that for all politicians. You need to be spending more time with families and less time with some of the lobbyists, because we don't have those, right? Parents and students don't have that. Spend less time with those groups and less time with the groups that are pushing around their power, and think about what we need in education. And again, if you believe in public schools, invest in public schools, dismantle the racism that is in public schools, every area of public schools. Be committed to the work. Don't just ask us to take on something that doesn't love us, doesn't want us, and has never thought about us. That is anti-Black.
Right. No, that's real. Another comment says parents aren't at the table yet. Every dollar that comes to the district depends on the child. We are missing in action. And you've been talking about that. Like,
I mean, it's the truth. I got, for my kids, and I don't like to speak about them this way, but I think that's like $36,000 in my household, one household for the district. We need to think about what that looks like. If we did our neighborhood, how much money in our neighborhood are the schools making off of our neighborhood? And I can't even send my kids to the nearest school to me because they're not good. Wow. Like, we need to be very real about where we are and the power that we have. But you're right, we're absolutely not at the table. But we have the power to be. We have the power to be. We have to, we have to do exactly what we've seen some of these power players do, and insert our power through, whether it be through our vote, in our everyday lives, whether that be through, whether our kids show up or don't show up, in some of these spaces. We need to know that we are powerful, and how we continue to build up, it's going to take pockets of parents. It won't just be, me and you, Zakiya, right? It will be pockets of parents everywhere. We started off as parents who had something happen to us and decided no more. We have that opportunity to do that all around the country. No more.
That's right. That's right. This has been great, Tunette. Certainly, we will definitely have to have you back. We're down to the last couple of minutes of our time together. I just really want to allow you an opportunity to just share, any final thoughts, to share, any other things that's on your heart that you haven't been able to share since, we've been in this space together. Because I think, a lot of parents, and I'm certainly speaking for myself as well, need some encouragement during this time. It's very difficult, for everybody, right? You think about essential workers and how Black families and Black parents and Black women in particular make up a majority of essential workers, right, in this country during this pandemic. And now they also have to figure out how to be a teacher as well and make sure that their children are educated. So this is something that's really important to me. And just leave us with some encouraging thoughts.
Yeah. And I think this is a good point. I'm gonna be speaking to myself as well. I need the encouraging, thoughts as well. And I think for me, raising Black children is a revolutionary act, and that's something that I think, we need to remember and sit with. Anything that you do that is revolutionary is not easy, especially in a society that constantly tries to dehumanize you and your Black babies. And so I do think that we're always going to be better together, the collective, right? The need for us to not stay siloed. If we think about Zakiya and I, at first, we were individual parents who were going through something, right? This happened to me. We were able to sit with the internalization of feeling like it was something about us that wasn't good, something about our babies that wasn't good. And the moment that we realized that we were not alone, we were activated, right? So I encourage Black families all over the world and other families of color to connect with each other, right? That when you do that, it's easier to be activated, right? When we refuse, to operate in these silos, because the divide and conquer is real, right? So how do we come together? How do we use the platforms that we have? How do we create those pods? And even outside of the pods, how do we create these little moments where we can come together as parents and think about what it looks like in Minnesota to advocate, for homeschooling resources, to think about what it means in Dayton, Ohio, to think about, how do we have a better school day that works because I'm a full-time working mama, to think about in Texas, how we do some of these things better, with our pods, and how do we support the families who need it the most? Like, think about what does that look like all around the country? And just to remember, that even when the world tells you that you are not enough, or that you are not good, or seeks to dehumanize you, or sees us as mothers who just laid on our back, who sees, our Black children as dangerous and less than, remember that there has to be a reason why they're working overtime to try to put us down. We are strong, we are brilliant. And in the words of Bettina Love, we want to do more than survive, and we deserve to do more than survive, right? Hang in there right now. It is tough, but I promise you that if we get on the front lines and assert our power, we will get what we want. And in the meantime, protect your peace. Thank you.
Yes, Tunette, that was beautiful. And I just really appreciate us ending on a high note like that, because we've talked
Yes.
about a lot. We've talked about the problem, we've talked about some
Yeah.
solutions. That's what I try
Yeah.
to do on this show, is really center like what the problem is, talk about some proposed solutions, and really try to end on a high note to leave people feeling like, okay, let's do this, right?
Yes, let's do it.
And so there is an action step, as I have mentioned earlier in this show about 15 minutes ago, that today we are doing an action, a day of action, today, Wednesday, to call on the FCC and to call on all of our government officials, local, state, and federal, to do the right thing and make sure that the 15 million children in this country right now and their families who are currently logged out, meaning they literally have no access to broadband. We're not making this up, folks. People in this country, many children, do not have access to the internet. Right now, the internet is not considered a public utility like the telephone, like your lights. All of those things are required for living. And because we're living in 2020 and we're living in an increasingly digitized world, we have to have internet to survive. We're using internet right now to have this show. My children have to use internet next week because they're virtual learning. This is absolutely a necessity. We placed a toolkit for you in the comments. There is lots of information, graphics, also links or Twitter, sample Twitter tweets that you can just hop on Twitter if you have a Twitter account, and make sure that you participate in this day of action. We really want to flood the FCC, the director of the FCC, to call on everyone to make sure that children are brought into the 21st century and have access to the internet. We can no longer not have internet and survive and thrive, right, in this 21st century. I also want to plug that obviously, next week we are here again on Wednesday at noon here on the Citizen Ed platform. And next week we'll have Dr. Ivory Tolson. And he will also be talking with us. He's another great ally and educator to Black parents. He'll be talking about his book, No BS, BS standing for bad stats, because a lot of times we get caught up into how other people are researching us. I know you know, Dr. Tunette, how researchers, even liberal researchers, can be anti-Black in their analysis of our community. And so Dr. Tolson has written an entire book about this, and he's going to really go in and really dissect that for our audience so that you can have the tools that you need not to accept negative stereotypes and narratives about our children and about our community. Again, this has been your host, Zakiya Sankara-Jabbar, for Building Power and Grassroots Education Advocacy. Don't worry, y'all. We're going to have Dr. Tunette back. You all were very live in the comments. This was a very active show. We appreciate you. And again, we're going to always center the experiences of parents, but particularly Black parents. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.